Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Erica with Memory Box Candle Co. and I make videos all about the journey of starting a candle business. And today's video is going to be my best tips when it comes to designing and printing off candle labels from home. So let's go ahead and get right into it. What are the best labels to use for making and printing candle labels from home? So I personally use Online Labels and they are sponsoring today's video. So thank you so much to Online Labels for sponsoring today's video. But genuinely, I've just been using them since the very beginning of my candle business. They were the first labels that I've used and have been using ever since. I just love the variety, the fact that you can order 1 or 2 sheets at a time if you're just trying it out, the different material types. I just love everything about Online Labels. How does it all work? So basically, when you are purchasing from somewhere like Online Labels, what they offer is pre-cut labels for you. So you choose whatever size you're looking for your candle jar or wax melts or room sprays or whatever product you're using, and you decide, what size you're looking for, and they have tons of different sizes on there, and they actually have it pre-cut. So I have a lot of questions about people saying, okay, so how am I going to cut it? Does my printer cut the labels? How does it work? So essentially how it works is that you're purchasing these pre-cut labels. It's not like the labels are coming off of the sheet. It's just little cut marks to where if you peeled it, it's going to be the exact label size that you ordered. But what you do is you put that sheet into your printer, and then Online Labels has a design and printing software called Maestro Label Designer. And what you do is you either design your label on there or you upload your label onto Maestro, and then you connect the template, the same template of the candle label sizes that you ordered that's in your printer, you connect it to that template, and it basically aligns it for you to where when you print it out at home, everything's lined up and it prints perfectly onto the label. So there's nothing that you're personally having to cut. You don't have to get like a cutting machine. Everything that you purchase from Online Labels is pre-cut, and then you just use their template so that it basically it takes from Maestro and it takes it to your home printer. So they're kind of talking to each other, so it knows exactly where to print it off when you're printing it from home. How do I know what size label to use for my candle jar? This is 100% personal preference. Again, another question I've gotten where people think that they have to use only a certain size for their candle jar. There are probably dozens of different sizes that you could use for every vessel out there. So don't think that you have to just do like a standard size or just do what somebody else is doing. You can play around and see. So what I recommend that you do is you take a flexible measuring tape and you put it up against the jar that you're wanting to label, and you just see the dimensions yourself. So figure out how wide it is, figure out, the circumference, figure out the height. And then what you're able to do is on Online Labels, you can actually filter the label sizes. So if your vessel is between 2.5 inches and 3.5 inches, you're able to filter those options and go through and see the different sizes that may work for the vessel that you're working with. Which label material should I choose? So again, this is a personal preference thing, but it may also be a design aspect of whatever jar you are working with. So for instance, if you're working with more of a shiny or glossier vessel, you may want to do a more glossier label, and vice versa with a matte vessel. You may want to do a more matte label. Online Labels does have a bunch of different materials that you can choose from. And again, you can do the test pages, so you can order a couple of sheets, try out the materials, see what's going to work the best with whatever vessel that you're working with. But something that we have noticed in the different materials that we have tried out, so we use the regular matte, the regular glossy white for laser, and then also the weatherproof for laser as well. And what we've noticed with those is that the matte, first of all, is probably the most cost-effective way. It's very simple. We use it for our warning labels at the bottom of the candle jars. But something about the matte, if you're just getting the regular matte, and also the glossy as well, is once you stick it to the product, it's not coming off. So I've tried that before in the past. it just rips. It's not going to come off. It's meant to just kind of stick and stay there. I believe they do have an option for a removable mat option. So if you're needing to, you know, place it, maybe you place it wrong, pull it back up and are trying again, or if you need to remove it, that's a good option. And then also the weatherproof for laser printers. This is actually what we use for our candle label jars, and we also use it for the room sprays as well. And the reason why we like the weatherproof labels is because there is a little tiny bit of like a shine to it, but not as much as the glossy labels, but just a tiny bit to it. And when you apply it, you can remove it. They're very thin, so you do have to worry about air bubbles getting in there, definitely. But the way that we try to combat air bubbles is by holding the label taut, so stretching it out and putting it down onto the product and starting from the middle. So basically putting a lot of pressure in the middle and pushing outward so that you're kind of pushing out any air bubbles. But the benefit is the fact that, you know, the material is great, weatherproof. I think it can withstand a little bit more of like temperature changes and stuff like that with the actual label, but also it is easy to remove if needed, which again, we do all the time with the products. So that's really nice. But if you're curious and interested in trying to figure out what type of material you want to use for your product, just order some sample sheets and give it a try and see what you like best. What printer do I need in order to print the candle labels from home? So I personally recommend, especially if you're just getting started, that you can utilize just a really standard color inkjet printer when you're getting started. We personally have a color laser printer that is honestly way too expensive now. I think I bought it when it was around $500 to $600, and now it's like $800 or $900 or something for the same kind of model. It's very expensive, but we have used the heck out of this thing. We have used it so many times. So let's look at the pros and cons between inkjet and laser printers. First of all, I would recommend that if you already have a printer at home, see if you can utilize that first. Don't think that there is like a candle label specific printer that you need to get. Yes, there are certain factors and qualities of certain printers that will help make your labels look more vibrant or just look overall more professional or better, but try to utilize what you already have if you already have one. If you don't already have a printer, I would recommend going the inkjet route just because they are more affordable, because most laser printers are meant for like black and white because they print really quickly. So that is a benefit of having a laser printer, is they print really fast. Whereas an inkjet printer, they're very slow to print. So it can take a pretty long time to print out what a laser printer could just kind of bust through a bunch of labels. And I think that's what really kind of caught my eye with this, is because we print so much that I liked to have something that could be a lot faster. So the pros to a laser jet printer is how fast they are. It's way more efficient, but sometimes the color may not be as bright or vibrant depending on the printer you get, and they are more expensive versus an inkjet printer. It is going to be slower to print, but most likely, especially if you get one that's like a photo inkjet printer. So I think I got started with a Canon Pixma something kind of printer, and it was for photo printing. So if you're looking into getting a printer, I would specifically look for one that prints photos if you have color labels. If you don't have color labels, you may just want to go with a laser printer, but if you do have color labels and you are needing to show that color, then the inkjet may be a good option for you. Just keep in mind that depending on the settings that you have on your computer, you may actually end up with labels that might smudge if you're trying to set it to like the best quality and it's going to put a bunch more ink onto the page. It could kind of sit on top of the label and then smudge. It's happened before with me in the past with my old inkjet printer. So if that happens to you, you may want to take the quality down to like normal or average or whatever it is on your settings. And that personally fixed the smudging issue for me. But those are kind of the pros and cons, but I would definitely recommend to get started with an inkjet printer and look for a printer, I don't know, between like maybe around like $100, $150, maybe even less. I haven't really looked into those printers too much. Maybe a little bit less, maybe a little bit more, but somewhere around that range, you could probably get a pretty decent printer for getting started with printing out labels from home. So now let's jump into the designing aspect of everything. So these are my best tips when it comes to actually designing your candle label. Now there are different places online that you can design. I personally really love Canva. I've been using Canva for a while now, but you can also design on Maestro Label Designer and have everything already on there on online labels because it's Maestro Label Designer, so it is a design software as well. But I've just been doing everything on Canva and I kind of have everything organized on there. So let's get into my top tips when it comes to designing the candle label. Fonts matter. I cannot stress this enough. I've always been really into fonts when I've been talking about candle label designs. And if you're using Canva as your design software, they actually allow you to use any of their 1,700 free fonts on the free Canva version available to you for commercial use. So commercial use is just where you're taking something and you're using it in a product that you are selling. So that is free to do on Canva. And then if you do have the pro version, they add on a bunch more fonts that you have to choose from as well that you can use for commercial use. And I highly recommend that you spend a lot of time on choosing your fonts. And it can be a little confusing, I understand, but my main tips when it comes to fonts is make sure that you can read it so that it's legible. And then also make sure that your fonts are not clashing. So you don't want to have like 3 or 4 different style fonts all over your label design. I either want you to pick just one font or 2 fonts when you're getting started and just kind of rearranging everything. So let's say you want your scent name to be in a script font. I would not recommend all of your other text to also be in script font. It's going to look very messy and kind of just not put together and all over the place. But if you change those other texts around your image to, let's say, a sans serif or a serif font, and you're leaving the scent name as a script, all of a sudden it starts to look more professional, more cohesive together, and it just looks a lot nicer together. If you're kind of wanting to do something like very minimalistic, like kind of how we do with ours, I think actually for most of our label designs, I think I just use one font for everything. But you could also do a mixture of a sans serif and a serif font if you kind of want to blend those two together. That's kind of what we do on the website as well. So I would recommend to just stick with 1 or 2 fonts when you are getting started with the designing process. The more simple that you can make it, the better, unless your brand is kind of this like wacky, more crazy kind of style, then don't listen to me with that. But if you're having nowhere to start, no idea where to start, keep it simple with the fonts and choose either 1 or 2 fonts when getting started. Focus on alignment and the overall composition of your candle label. I can't tell you how many times I've seen candle labels out there where I'm like, oh, if only they would have like centered this better, or moved it over, or this went up there, that would have looked a little bit better, and I don't know if that's just my eye kind of catching it because of how many different label designs that I have created before, but there's kind of this balance and overall look to the candle label that when you're messing around and doing different things, because on Canva you can change the line height, so the space in between each new line of text that you have, or even the spacing in between the letters that can also give kind of a new design style to your label as well. So it's not just the fonts, but it's kind of like how you can make the fonts look, the size, the spacing, all that kind of stuff, but definitely alignment. So really focus on that, and Canva allows you to kind of have that snap feature. So if you're wanting to have everything centered, it will just kind of like snap it into place. Maestro Label Designer does that as well. So definitely take advantage of that when you are designing to make sure that everything is kind of aligned in the way that you're wanting it to be. Do a test print. This is going to be very beneficial to you to see if you actually like the way your label looks when it's an actual label. Sometimes it looks a little bit different when you are actually designing it versus when it's printed out. You may find that your text is too small You may not like the text on how it actually prints out, and you may want to change the font, the size, the alignment. You may find that you left too much white space somewhere and you're trying to adjust it. And what's really nice is on Maestro Label Designer, I know a lot of people don't know that you can actually just print one label at a time. So you can go on and just select which area of the actual label sheet that you want it to be printed off as. And you don't have to print an entire sheet as a test print. You can just do one label at a time. But I really recommend this before you start printing out a bunch of sheets of your labels, to do a couple test prints and make some tweaks until you really like the way that it looks. Play around with capitals and lower cases. This is kind of going back to the text and the font thing, because again, this is just a huge part of the overall label, because most of the time, most labels are going to be primarily text-based, and you would be very surprised to see the different vibe or feel that you get from the label when you either capitalize the first letter of every word, or everything's lowercase or everything's uppercase. There is a different feel that you get from the label design itself when you are changing those things up. And it's really just going back to, your brand and what you're wanting to showcase with your label. But just know that you can kind of play around with that, and that's just kind of a different aspect of changing your label up. And then the last tip is keep on brand. So this is basically just keep authentic to you and your brand. This is just my personal advice when it comes to designing, from designing so many different candle label designs over the years. But if you have a specific kind of theme or vibe or whatever it is that you have with your brand and it doesn't work with any of these tips that I've given, then go what is going to be best for you and your brand. If your brand is not minimalistic and simple like ours is, if it's kind of more like hippie or, I don't know, just more out there or loud or vibrant or whatever it is, then go based on that, and then go, with whatever is going to be on brand for you, and really run with that, because you can really make the candle labels look so unique if you are being authentic to you and your brand self. And then one last thing I forgot to mention that I wanted to add on when I was talking about doing the test print is when you're doing a test print, you're actually able to see if your candle label design fits correctly on the label. There is something called edge-to-edge printing when you are purchasing these labels from online labels, and that is something that you may want to do if you have labels that have either text or element designs that go on the outer sides of the label. The reason why you have to get specific sizes and specific labels for that is because home printers have about, I want to say it's like a centimeter or like half an inch or something around the side of the paper that is a no print area. So if you get labels where the labels go all the way to the edge of the paper, it's going to get cut off. So in order to mitigate that, you want to make sure that you are choosing labels that have edge-to-edge printing. And I will throw up some examples of different sizes to show you what I mean by that, to where it's going to be closer in and bigger spaces in between the label so that you can guarantee that you're able to get that full label image on there. And then last thing I wanted to mention is that Online Labels just recently released their candle label warning label roll. So this is a big roll of warning labels. So if you are looking for just basic warning labels, they do have those available now on their website. So I will have that linked below in the comment section below, as well as 10% off your order from Online Labels. So I will have that link down below as well, so you can use that towards an order. Also, a huge thank you once again to Online Labels for sponsoring today's video. I love talking about labels. I love talking about candle label designs. And I feel like I've been designing for so long now that it's just such like a passion of mine. I just love the designing process. I really didn't know how much I liked graphic design until I really got into it. But I really hope that you can utilize these tips and all the information in this video and feel a little bit more comfortable and confident as you are diving into creating and printing out your own candle labels from home. But with that, I am going to end today's video right here. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave it a big thumbs up, as well as subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, don't forget to follow me over on Instagram at MemoryBoxCandleCo, and I will see you in my next video.